Hello tanks and tankettes, and welcome to a view replay, courtesy this time of CM1994, whom I have featured a bunch of replays from, of course, at this stage. And as ever, I will point out that he has his own Twitch channel where he does lots of World of Tanks things. Last time round, I think it was a Churchill gun carrier game where he was 3-marking it and using a lot of premium ammo in the process. This time, possibly 3-marking, possibly not. I'm not entirely sure. I don't think there was any information about it in the description. But it's a machine I've not featured before, the 705A, which is the newest Tier 10 Soviet Heavy, I believe. And it is, in some ways, the Soviet E100. It's a 152mm gun, although it doesn't hit quite as hard as the E100's gun. But it also has slightly less derpy stats, reasonable penetration, and the tank it's attached to, well, it's a bit of a funny looking beast, but it isn't half bad in terms of armour. It's, in fact, in some ways, not unlike the E100s. It doesn't have those flat surfaces, of course, but the low front plate is definitely a weak spot if you aren't angled at all, and even if you are angled, it's not the strongest lower front plate. The upper front plate and the shoulders are a lot better, and you can actually get some pretty good effective armour out of it if you are angling enough but not over angling. I couldn't even tell you how much that is in degrees, but so long as you're on flat ground it's fine. But if somebody gets the opportunity to fire down on that frontal armour, it suddenly gets a lot less bouncy. And that might be an issue because there are some enemy tanks up on the hill there, and CM has quite aggressively pushed forward at this point. Now, one thing to note at this stage that is probably going to be quite pertinent to how this ends up working out is that there is no artillery in play, which is, you know, as far as the players are concerned, going to be a bonus, I guess, but it also maybe partly explains why this ends up being, well, quite a static game. This one is essentially going to be trench warfare. His team are pushing a little bit here, but we can see there's a whole bunch of enemies up north. Well, I say a whole bunch. There's a couple of enemies up north, and it looks like they're overwhelming his teammates, but there are also some tanks much closer to the base as well. So even if those tanks to the northwest do fall, there's not really an immediate danger of being capped out. So most of each team does appear to be here, and it's basically going to be, as I say, trench warfare. It's just going to be a massively bruising encounter from both sides. So CM's pushed up a bit more, as have his teammates. The enemy team really haven't. They're content so far to just hold the positions that they are in, including some enemy tank destroyers who have shaved off, at this point, close to half his health. Those are some nasty hitting guns, but he's got a nasty hitting gun himself. It does, I think, 650 average damage. And at this point he's even onto his premium ammo, and I'm going to say it right now, he does use all of his premium ammo in this one, but he uses most of his AP as well. It's not just exclusively premium ammo spam. So we know the Badger is there, and I've sped this up a bit because there was about a minute of not a lot happening. The Badger was just being super sneaky and, well, manages to get another hit into him, unfortunately, but they have lost a lot of health themselves in the process. There are a lot of tanks around that corner. What is in their favour, though, is that an STI... Was it an ST1? Gosh, I used to know this. There was debate for years and years, and then it was definitively settled, and then I've basically forgotten what the definitive answer was, but never mind. Anyway, I think it's the ST1, right? Yeah, it is. So the ST1 has pushed around, and that has given them a bit of distraction, but that ST1 is probably not going to last that long. There is an Object 430 coming around that way as well, but you can see the ST1's just getting mobbed. And so, although they've had a little bit of a window here to maybe be a little more aggressive, CM can't take too many more hits, and the Type 4 Heavy is being maybe a little overly cautious. But they are doing something. This moisture here, though, they definitely can't afford to take any more hits at this point. So the Type 4 is just peeking out a little bit, and CM is, I think, waiting for the enemies to fire before he really does anything, because if he can get hull down, it's fine, but I don't think the gun depression on this is good. The turret is really very good, but because it's got this semi-rear mounted turret, it's sort of mid to rear mounted, I don't know what you'd call it exactly. 5 degrees of gun depression, there we go, I've just looked it up. Yeah, it's a definite disadvantage of this design. Now that looked like it was going to be a really nice shot. Unfortunately, that Object 257 just drove in the way at exactly the wrong moment and absorbed the hit. So that E-75 should be dead right now, but fortunately for them, their ally did a "get down, Mr. President," and managed to save them. It takes another shot, but it's just really the upper part of the turret he's got available, so he's struggling a bit there. The only one of them that you just caught a glimpse of there that has any kind of hit points left on this flank now is the IS-7, and they're not being particularly aggressive. So this is looking a little bit dicey, but they are putting some pressure on. And if you've been paying attention to what's been going on the rest of the map, you'll know that they're not doing too badly overall. The M103 has gone around to the northwest, and there is still a Conqueror around there somewhere, but it's going to be a while before there are any more flanking allies to come up behind these guys. It really is just CM and these tanks here, and a tank destroyer that's way back behind them. That's going to be the Guerrilla 15. So if these enemies push up a bit further, the Guerrilla 15 might have some shots, but it's going to take these enemies pushing up because they have been really very shy about being aggressive in any way, shape or form. In fact, it's been completely the opposite. They've just been passive and let CM's team push into them. But it's, I mean, it's sort of been working for them, but it's also sort of not been working for them, because apart from the enemy Conqueror, this is it. This is all that's left of their team at this point. And although CM is himself now still alone, he's still alive, crucially, and these enemies that are now finally pushing towards him a bit, well, he's got the Guerrilla to help him out, but they're also quite severely bruised. They are damaged. And because they're being cautious, because they're not using their weight of numbers to just push round and finish him off, he is, in fact, able to just keep using this wreck. But finally, however, this E100 does try and come forwards a bit, and that's a bit of a problem for CM, but not that much of a problem, because he's just trying to fire heat through the front of the turret. Unfortunately, however, the E100 was wiggling their turret sufficient to actually neutralise that shot. And that's the last of CM's heat shells. He's now relying on his AP and his HE. With a shot like that on the lower front plate, though, he'd have to flub it fairly badly to miss at this range, even with this somewhat derpy gun handling, and so that's the immediate threat out of the way. The M103 has now come round to the south, and it's just these last two enemy tanks at this point, so although CM's a little bit hesitant to rush forwards, it does rather look like these last two tanks are fully occupied with the M103 that is much closer to them, and so he really can just go for it at this stage. So a big old hit into that 103, who gets finished off by the Guerrilla, and we're going to jump ahead slightly here because it is just the Conqueror left, but the M103 decides not to get into a DPM fight with the Conqueror, which is entirely smart, and so they just wait for CM and other allies to show up, which is entirely the sensible move. So CM gets another big hit into the rear of the Conqueror, and the M103, who can survive, even if he takes the hit. Well, it looks like he's going to try and, you know, it looked like he was going to try and do it, and then he didn't. The Guerrilla took a shot, I guess, on the move and missed, and so it's actually CM that gets the final kill. Don't ask me what the PTA was doing for most of this game, by the way. You might have noticed they weren't being the most proactive player. Maybe they were horribly low health, I don't know. So, a real bruiser of a fight. You can see why I called that one Trench Warfare. 7,000 damage done. Tiny bit of spotting damage to go with that. A steel wall, unsurprisingly, and that was an ace tanker as well. So, just overall, a really, you know, it's a good showcase of how tough this tank can be. He bounced a fair bit of damage there, over 6k. Not quite as much as the mouse game I showed yesterday, but still, that's a pretty respectable amount of bounced damage, and it just goes to show that if you angle it right, if you are being smart about using cover and hiding your lower front plate as much as you possibly can, this thing is a fairly tough nut to crack. So I'm going to finish off this video by pimping out my replays portal a little bit. I remember to do this every so often. There's some features there you might not be aware of, even if you are aware of the portal. If you click on the YouTube replays button, it will basically show you everything I've featured on the channel, because the portal is where I go to pick out my YouTube replays these days for World of Tanks anyway. I do still have an email address that I primarily use for World of Warships, so if you're desperate to email me something, you know, tanks, an older tanks replay or something that you can't upload elsewhere, you can do it via that particular email. But for the most part, yeah, go and upload your replays to my portal and I will take a look through, and I can use various useful filters to, you know, find interesting tanks that I haven't shown before, or tanks from certain nations, or, you know, whatever I feel like on any given day, basically. So hopefully you have enjoyed this replay, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down under the video, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.